Hello, everybody, and we are live. Frank Griffith is here, Ken Steiner is here, and we'll be back after we've heard Coco.
And here comes number one for your dancing this evening, a bit of jungle jive by Duke and the Boys. It's known as Coco.
Hello, welcome to the 25th edition of Uptown Lockdown, and we're live from two places in the UK, and our guest is all the way from South Seattle. Welcome, Ken. Ken
Hey, good
Steiner,
morning.
who's very nicely awakened quite early this morning in order to be here with you today, and we're very pleased to have him along. Just a couple of words about Ken, and then we'll have Ken tell you about the next track and a little bit more about what he's doing. Ken heard the Ellington Band in 1974 in Georgetown, just before Duke passed. So well done. Georgetown, of course, is a university in Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And of course, Ellington was from Washington. And at that point, he met Jack Towers as part of the Duke Ellington Society in the U.S. So that's quite a long relationship. And he's been rehearsing the history for the last 20 years of Ellington, and he's given presentations and a fair few conferences, including ones in Stockholm, London, Amsterdam, Portland, Oregon, where I'm from, and New York and Washington D.C. So that's quite a dossier of presentations. And thanks again, Ken. Please, I'll hand you the baton now, and you can tell us a little bit about what you're going to do today.
So, Ken, you're
Great.
proudly an independent scholar, aren't you?
Well, that's almost a pejorative in these days to be called an independent researcher as the Ellington world is moving into the academic world. So I really, I'm not ready to start the show by grinding my axe. I'd like to say
Proudly, I
thanks.
said proudly. Didn't I say proudly, though? I certainly meant to.
Oh, great. Thank you. Well, it's independent researchers who have really been doing the yeoman's work
Sure.
in the Ellington world for the first few decades at least, and now it's moving into the academic world, which is great. And a good example of that we're going to talk about a little bit later this morning. There's an upcoming musical biography of Jimmy Blanton that Matthias Hamann has presented and earned his doctorate at the University of Antwerp. And it's in the final stages of being printed, and everything's being delayed with COVID. But I'll be talking about some of my research on Jimmy Blanton, which is my favorite Ellingtonian. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later. But really, I wanted to start just by saying thank you so much for everything you're doing in the UK, that you have done for Duke since 1933, with your gracious reception for your treatment of Ellington as an artist who had been coming off of years in the Cotton Club, and later confessed that he was about to give up when he went to Britain, and it really just lifted him and his band's spirit. And what you're doing right now is just great. I love this Uptown lockdown title. It's just perfect because we're all in the same boat. Anthony, I saw you in March, which was a really at a pivotal point, just as COVID was breaking and the Ellington conference was canceled. About 6 hours before a presentation I had been working on for about the previous 6 months. So that was on Duke on radio, but that just seems like another world. And it's great to reconnect, because the best thing about Duke Ellington's music, besides the music itself, is the people you meet. And, we're all in our own little rabbit hole.
Well, that's one of the wonderful things. It's really, for me, the key thing actually about the conferences is the just the fact of people actually physically meeting, traveling, putting themselves out to talk about and confer with others about Duke Ellington and matters ducal. And thank you so much on behalf of the United Kingdom. Yes, going back all those years, all those decades, and indeed thank you so much for your kind words about the programme. So we find ourselves 80 years and 4 days on from a monumental event.
Well, yes. I think there's been celebrations and certainly different radio programs around the world, and I can't say that I've caught too many of them. I know Rob Bamberger, who had lost his program on WAMU, which is a tragedy, regained his program and replayed an interview he did with Jack Towers, which I think can be viewed online at WAMU, so it'd really be checking. Being with you guys brings back so many memories, and it was just 5 years ago today. We were, I believe Frank missed the Portland conference.
Yeah, sadly.
We had a conference in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, that's right. Was that actually our anniversary today? Yes, goodness.
Yeah. Thanks to it was either Facebook or my photos and iPhone that reminded me, and I have to admit I enjoyed seeing pictures with Luca Bragalini and Walter Vandeleur and other attendees, Willie Ruff. And I have to mention before we get started just the memory of Jeff Smith, our dear friend, who came out. We had that little mini conference in Seattle and then drove down to Portland. And it was, Jeff really was an instigator. And the Ellington conferences were going by the wayside when he reinvigorated them in 2012 with the Woking Conference, and came up with the brilliant idea of partnering with an organization, in his case, the Borough of Woking, which I believe was receiving funds from the 2012 Olympics. So
yes, that's correct. Yes, so Jeff was a councillor there, well, ex-councillor by that point, and was well in with the council. And they were very pleased to be able to put on a cultural event to chime with the jubilee that there was, as well, of course, as the London Olympics in 2012.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we played at a little bistro over the road from the hotel called the Lighthouse. You might remember, both of you chaps,
Sure, the
on the
light
Sunday,
box.
the Lightbox, and the first number we played was "I'm Beginning to See the Lightbox." Remember that one? And what was the other one that we played? Something about Woking.
Oh, we had lots of puns about Woking.
Yeah,
Yes,
and another
Woking
extraordinary.
Doogie. That was my favourite.
Just speaking
Uh,
locally,
Well,
from Ken,
and
yeah,
Woking
yeah.
Fit
I'm
the Battle of
walking.
Alabama, of course, as well. Not to forget the civil rights there.
We spent every Woking hour, but
Oh God,
Ken,
tell me about it, Frank.
I
Well,
just
Frank was
want
a co-organizer with Jeff Smith and myself
yes,
of that
yes,
conference
and I'm still recovering from it now.
yes, well, aren't we all?
Yeah.
But,
Here we are. We're almost a decade on, and we were thinking about maybe holding another conference, but that's not happening at the moment, clearly.
but I'll
Yeah,
get to my later bit.
No,
later.
so
Go ahead,
Ken, I
Ken.
mean, when did I first meet you and you meet me?
Well, I believe it was at the Ellington conference in DC in
Oh,
1999.
that's so
100th
long
anniversary.
ago, isn't it? Goodness me. So
Yeah,
that
well,
was
that
the
was my first conference, and for me, that was a homecoming. My DC years were from 1971 through 86. I went to Georgetown, graduated in 75, and then did a radio program till
yes.
86. So 99 was really a homecoming for me to DC, and it was really exciting. And
Yeah.
it was a chance to reconnect with a lot of friends in DC I hadn't seen in a long time, and then also connect with the larger Ellington world. I met Jeff Hofschmidt, Janice Steed, yourself. I think briefly we met.
Likely.
Was that your first conference, Anthony?
No, it wasn't. No. But it was the centennial conference, wasn't it? The centenary, as we call it over here, but the centennial of Duke's birth. And they were celebrating it in his hometown there. So that was an excellent event, as I recall. So yes.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, my DC years were really, I guess you could say, my formative years. I went to school, but it really connected me with the city of DC, and that's where I took a jazz history class. I heard Ellington in concert. I was a member of the stage crew, so I was sitting off on the wings. I really loved, first of all, the fusion sound of the early 70s, Miles Davis, tribute to Jack Johnson. That was kind of my gateway to the real jazz. I'd follow Miles groups back to Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock, and then further back to with Coltrane and Cannonball, and then further back to with Charlie Parker.
Yes.
And was really learning jazz history. And DC had a tremendous scene in the 70s, and Ellington grew up there, and there were people who knew him. There's a great pianist there by the name of John Malachi, who I remember did a solo presentation of Ellington at the piano, which is one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. And, I had John Malachi and people like him in the Ellington world as guests on my radio program.
So you're
John Malachi, pardon?
No, I'm sorry. I was just jumping in there to say that you are indeed an experienced broadcaster. Please tell us about John Malachi.
Well, just two comments he made that I'll always remember. I referred to Duke's percussive style of playing piano, and he said it was percussive when he wanted it to be percussive, just breaking through that kind of standard view of Ellington's piano style. And the other thing he mentioned, actually two other things he mentioned. One, that he wrote the greatest intros ever, and we're gonna hear one in a bit, and and also that he was the greatest comp pianist, as he called it. He just was the greatest in backing the many soloists in his band. So Why don't we hear some more music now? Why don't do you have?
And I just, as we were going to do that, you did send over some photographs as well. So let's actually see if we can
Yeah, can you show those while
show
listen
the
to?
audience. Hello, audience. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon, or indeed this morning, if you're over on that side of things. So I have a picture here of the whole band. Is this from Fargo? Because we're talking about Fargo, aren't we? We heard Coco there from Fargo. And
Right.
I don't think we said that, but I suppose it was obvious to the aficionados. But in any case, so we'll talk a bit about how Fargo happened to be recorded. But yes, so this picture here, the main one, let's just see if I can. Let's see if I can bring that up here while not taking us off. Yes, there we go. Okay. So the audience is seeing that picture, and then there are other pictures here as well. There's a picture
Great.
of Ben Webster.
Yeah. Okay. Those photos at Fargo were taken by Jack Towers, who recorded the band. I mean, as if it weren't enough to record the band sonically, but to record it visually too. I mean, is rather stunning.
Yeah.
I asked him if he had taken another picture of Blanton, because the only picture we have of Blanton is from behind, and Jack regretted. He goes, "No," like it pained him that he hadn't, amongst all that he accomplished that evening, he hadn't taken a picture of Blanton.
Oh,
Well, never mind. He did record him, though, extraordinarily. Shall we, as you say, hear some more music, and then we'll come back and you can talk a little more about Fargo.
Okay, great.
What are we going to hear?
what's the next track?
Hello, are we still connected?
Sidewalks of New York?
We're gonna.
Oh, yes. Ken, hello there, Ken. Yes, please introduce the next track, the second track here.
Okay, great. We're going to hear a tune that wasn't recorded by Ellington in the studio for Victor at the time. So this is the only version. And he was calling out the song titles for Jack Towers, who wasn't familiar with all the tunes, because it was a lot of new, great 1940 repertoire. So on the air from Fargo, 80 years ago.
Oh yeah.
on the air there by Duke Ellington, I suppose. The Duke Ellington Orchestra at Fargo, North Dakota in 1940 on the 7th of November, just over 80 years ago. Did it on the air ever turn up as anything else in any form, any shape or form?
No, it's just really a fun tune that they were working on, and they recorded so much in 1940. Evidently, they couldn't record everything. But I just love the way the band sounds at Fargo and the way Jack Towers recorded them with 3 microphones. As best I understand, one was attached to the microphone for the soloists on the PA system.
Right.
Then there was one off to the right as you look at the band that would cover the brass and reed. And then one over on the left, which would be the rhythm of Duke, Blanton, and Greer, who we hear to great effect. And the band just really, to me, just, I don't know, what do you think, Frank? I just think they swing like crazy at Fargo.
Yeah, I think that we shouldn't underestimate the uniqueness and, if you like, distinctiveness of a Fargo away place for a band like Basie or Ellington. I toured all over the States myself with a considerably different band for about 6 months, led by, it wasn't led by, but it was the Glenn Miller Band.
Led by Glenn Miller.
Which everyone's going to just chuckle because, it was Glenn Miller, not Duke Ellington. So
Yeah, but, I'm just to interject, Frank, that, for my mom's generation, and there's very few of them left, she died at 95 a couple years ago, but for her generation, you play In the Mood to some people in their 80s and 90s, and all of a sudden they're 18 years old again.
Sure.
exactly. And you won't be surprised to learn that Ellington recorded and arranged many of those songs for his own band on Aren't the Big Bands Back, 1961.
Or whatever it's called, yes, indeed.
Yeah, well, the idea. He did 1 O'Clock Jump.
That
he
series
did
of recordings that were made then, yes.
all
or
kinds of stuff.
a bit
for
later on,
Reed
yes.
Records. But I will say that these ballrooms we played, because this was 1984, so
Right.
a lot of these legendary Fargo-like ballrooms were still, standing. And they had the ghosts and the spirit of everyone from Basie, Ellington, Tommy Dorsey, Kay Kaiser, you name the band, they played there. And I just think there's something really special about those rooms. And that could have been one of the best gigs the band played that whole year. We don't know, do we?
Well, that's what's so special to me about the Fargo recording, because I've really been enjoying researching for the last 20 years Ellington's travels on the road and going through Klaus Stradiman and Ken Bale's books and double checking all those dates and finding hundreds of additional dates and photos and reviews of concerts and theater performances. But those dances, we know very little about what was played, what happened. You'd look in the papers and there'd be an ad and there'd be almost nothing the next day, or there might be a one-page item a week later saying that Fred and Selma Plout, heard Ellington at the dance in Evansville on Tuesday night. But with Fargo, we really find what the band's repertoire was, what they played. And of course, it was the Ellington Orchestra at its height. But what, among the many things that impresses me is even though, people have commented that the band was tired and they were on the road, they were professional. They were really professional. They played hard. They played with enthusiasm. And, I love that one photo, if we can show it as we go to hear some more Duke from Fargo, we see that there's a throng of people. This is a dance, but there's a throng of people around
Sure.
the stage that's
That's
as
right.
thick as you can see on the photo, that's about 20 persons thick. And I would have been one of those persons if I was at, but thanks to Jack Towers, not only do we have the chance to hear it, but it's in really great sound. It's just a little bit, the only limitation really is that he was limited to 6 minutes at a time. So we're going to hear Sidewalks of New York, where there is an interruption right in the middle of Jimmy Blanton soloing, but it's still great. It's the beginning of the third set. The band is slow to coming to the stage. So we just hear Ellington, Blanton, and Greer for about a minute. And then the band comes in and they're swinging. And Webster and Tricky both have just really great solos. And I don't know if this tune, The Sidewalks of New York, if you're familiar with it over there across the water, is a very corny tune that dates back to the 1890s.
Sure.
And it was the theme song of Jimmy Walker, the mayor of New York. So it's a tune that Ellington and the band members would have heard hundreds, if not thousands of times by the time they were performing it at Fargo. I mean, it's one of those earworms that get stuck in your head. East side, west side, all, that's, the tune. And so I almost hear, in my ears, I hear sarcasm, especially coming from Tricky, who's at one point or at the same time, he's ridiculing the song, making fun of it, but he's playing beautifully. And it's just a lot of fun. And I think we need to look at Ellington. We often try to compare him to Beethoven and Mahler and as a great composer, but he was more than just a composer. It was an event. It was not just a musical performance. It was an event, and it was a lot of fun. And so let's check in on Fargo, 80 years. And what did you say, 4 days ago?
Yeah.
1940.
Makes sense, yes. So here we go. New York there by Duke Ellington, well, played by Duke Ellington, at Fargo, North Dakota, in 1940. Only just in North Dakota, though. Looking at it on the map here, it's right on the border with Minnesota. In fact, the area, the built-up conurbation, as it were, there spills over the border. Do we know?
Sorry.
Do you
sorry,
know
what-
roughly where in Fargo it was a Crystal Ballroom, wasn't it?
Well,
Was.
it was not. It was not a big. It was not a big city. You know, you had a small downtown, and it was in the downtown area. It was the center of an agricultural area. The band was on tour. They were traveling by train. They left Chicago.
Right.
They went. They played the previous night in Winnipeg, and there are some clippings. I don't know if you have a chance to show them. I have one of the band the previous night in Winnipeg, or of Ellington.
Yeah, so what
previous
I've
night
done,
in
all the pictures and things that you've sent, I put onto a web page here that I can scroll down. So meet the Duke in person. Should we just show that? Here we go.
While you're looking for that, I've really
Is that the one you're talking about? The meet the Duke in person picture, or there it is.
the marquee, the photo of the marquee.
No. Is that so? Look, yes. So here we go. I love this old stuff. I don't know really. Here, world famous orchestra leader and composer. So they mention that. So not just a songwriter, but a composer. They say here, who appeared with his all Negro aggregation in the Twin Falls. Is it? Last night.
Yeah.
To delight dancers.
Ah.
And Duke is caught in a gay mood by the news photographer as he strikes a toe-kicking something on the piano. I tell you what, the resolution of these pictures is not super high. These are scans.
Yeah.
From these scans from microfilm or something, I guess. Possibly. What is that word?
Yeah, either from microfilm or increasingly newspapers or online. And the guy you really should have on your program is David Palmquist,
Yeah.
because
Definitely.
he's been discovering something new about every 60 minutes,
I know.
especially in these days of online research. And he's put together this magnificent website, and Stephen Lasker and I have given everything we have, or in the process of giving everything we have to David. And
Hasn't he got it all yet? Goodness me, is there more to come?
well, it's just a flood of material, and Palmquist is doing Ellington's entire life from 1899 to 1974, where I'm saving Ellington research of his later years to my old age.
Sure, exactly. Well, yes, absolutely, a good plan.
I
on
pretty
that.
much, after 42, I did a couple projects for Storyville for broadcasts at the Hurricane in 43 and the Treasury shows in 45 and 46. But I really love this, the Blanton Webster band.
Sure.
And, it arouses some controversy, and it'd be more fun to discuss this over a beer than over the internet. But sometimes I think people misinterpret me when I say that. I do think the Blanton Webster band was the greatest era of Ellington, and some people say, well, everything Ellington, Ellington was a creative artist and
Sure.
was growing all his life and was composing music on his deathbed, and you can't just point to one period. And I'm not disagreeing with that. All of Ellington is, my favorite era of Ellington is the one I'm listening to at that moment.
Well said. So I would just say, I mean, obviously David is very welcome, but I wouldn't say that the person we need is David. You're very welcome here too, and indeed there are lots of people who are. But David, I have been in touch with him, or at least I've attempted to. It's quite difficult. The communication's obviously a little bit sketchy because he's up in Canada, of course, just slightly north of you, isn't he? But not walking distance, more or less.
Well, David lives about, depending on how long it takes to cross the border, 4 to 5 hours away. And
Yes.
we've gotten together in Amsterdam, Stockholm, DC, London, but only once in the Northwest,
Oh,
which
really?
was for the Portland conference.
Oh, really?
So
Well, it's yeah, because I mean, I think the border's closed at the moment, isn't it?
it
But
is.
I mean,
Yeah, we've
yeah.
got, yeah.
Oh
So
dear. Oh, well,
great to reach
hopefully,
out.
hopefully, when we all get jabbed, um, it's the great triumph of the current, but not necessarily very much longer administration in America. There, we'll all get jabbed for Christmas, or perhaps in the new year, and maybe things will settle down a bit.
Can I
Um,
just
Well, you
jump
know,
in order to move the show along?
only if you insist, Frank.
Yeah, no, because otherwise, we get a bit carried away with. I just want to say something before our esteemed guest plays the next track. I mentioned the big band's album he did, and all of which tunes were other big band compositions. They weren't Ellington's compositions. He got one or two of his in, but it was like about 20 tracks, and as I said, bassy numbers, Jimmy Lunsford, you name it, Glenn Miller. But I want to mention that this next cut, if I'm correct, is Stardust, written by the great Hoagie Carmichael, of course. And I just happen to have the music with me. And the lyrics were written by Mitchell Parrish, and it's considered one of the most played standards of all time, one of the most popular standards. And the idea of hearing a Strayhorn or Ellington arrangement of it just completely delights me, because their music and style and sound was just as strongly embodied in their arrangements of other songs. It wasn't just their own music they played, you know. This album is a good example of this, because it was a dance, and they presumably were playing songs that people knew outside of their canon, okay? And this song is special because it's got a very long verse. It's got a 16-bar verse. As a matter of fact, just as an example of how special the verse is, Sinatra recorded an album around the same time, early 60s, called Sinatra with Strings. These incredible arrangements by Don Costa. And he recorded Stardust, but he only included the verse, and there was no Stardust that it was just the verse, the introduction. So that's unusual for a singer of Sinatra's might to just record the verse of a song. And so I just think it's a very interesting thing to listen to. Ellington's treatment of another song. So let's go for it.
Yeah, let me add a couple things before we start, if I may.
Please do.
Yeah, adding to Frank's comments, that at this point, this is the last set of the evening, and Ben Webster and others in the band had asked Jack what he was doing. They were aware at this point that he was recording and had heard some of the playback between sets. And Webster asked Jack Towers if he could record something special that he and Jimmy Blanton had been working out. And that's what we're going to hear, which is Stardust. So, yeah.
Go for it. Hello, Duke Ophiles and Strayhorn Ophiles. I'm going to give you my bendition of Stardust with the verse.
Lovely.
Stardust, thank you, Ken. That was Stardust by the great Hoagie Carmichael and Mitchell Parrish.
Oh, that's quite loud when you do that, Frank.
Just in terms of Ben Webster, just a complete, unique, distinctive figure, probably known more for his ballad playing, and he won critic described him as playing a weeping tenor. It had kind of a weeping, breathy sound to it. And he, like a lot of jazz musicians, especially of his generation, fully enjoyed himself through life. Spent the last sort of third of his career living in Denmark, and played a lot throughout Europe, recorded a lot of albums. He did 2 or 3 with the great Don Byas, who was a contemporary of his. Just a towering figure in the music. And those of us that live in the UK often hear stories about him playing at Ronnie Scott's, the great jazz club in London. And Ronnie Scott, of course, got to know him. And I've got a number of friends here in the UK, one of whom is a great bass player called Dave Green, who Anthony knows. And his claim to fame is driving Ben around London, when he was playing bass with him in the 1960s. Can you imagine having Ben Webster in your car? So there you go. That's the great Ben Webster. Like Ken, I could talk for hours about Ben, but we have more music. And
we'll have you back, Frank.
Learn a little bit more about.
Yeah, that could be an entire program or series in itself, Frank.
Absolutely. Are you kidding?
But
So there we are. Fargo,
that's what I
North
think.
Dakota, immortalized by Jack Towers and
Jack Towers and Ben Webster maintained a lifelong friendship from that evening on.
and I was going to mention Dick Boris. Is that right?
Yes.
The
Jack was always quick to give Dick Burris credit, who had passed away earlier. Just one last thing I wanted to add about Jack before we move on is that Jack was the greatest guy in the world. And if you liked Ellington, he had all day for you. I'm one of many persons who was invited to his famous basement studio. And this was the days before reissues. And he just had this amazing collection that blew everyone away. So always great to think of Jack Towers and his spirit of generosity as we approach Ellington research. I wanted to pivot a bit to, as we talk about the Blanton-Webster era, and I think maybe we should call it the era rather than the Blanton-Webster band, because it was always Duke Ellington's band. But it was a very special era. And it was not only just for Ben Webster's great playing, as Frank pointed out, but Webster inspired the whole band. They loved listening to him play. They loved him getting the solo space and the different things he'd come up with every night that we hear on some of the air checks. And you can only imagine what they were playing after hours in Los Angeles in 1941 on Central Avenue. And he and Blanton were very, very close. And Blanton just the same. It was not just his playing and his revolutionary style of playing, but he inspired the band. And there's other people who are more qualified to comment on this. Michael Kirkpatrick of Duke leads a band and is a musicologist and can talk about this. But I think he'd agree that Ellington loved the bass, and he counted on the bass to drive the band. And Ellington put it quite poetically. He said, we floated out on that tremendous pulse and that sea of I don't even have the quote, that sea of expectancy, that anticipation. The band just sounds great on everything that Blanton plays. And so I wanted to mention, and maybe you can show the cover when we start getting into the next, we're going to flip into 1941. I mentioned a new biography, and please don't ask me when it's coming out, because the author's very patiently waiting with the publisher and everything's delayed with COVID. But I have read his Matthias Hyman's doctoral thesis and worked with him quite a bit. And it was really great, because I was fascinated with Blanton and was doing my own research, but there's no way I'd be qualified to write the kind of biography that he has written, because he's a bassist himself. So he not only analyzes Blanton's brilliance as a bassist, but delves thoroughly into his biography. And I was able to share a lot of information that I learned from Jimmy Blanton's younger sister, Carolyn Blanton. She's 9 years younger. I had reached her by phone. She was wonderful. We had a number of phone conversations. She sent me a number of memorabilia. And I did not record our conversations. I took notes. But the interesting thing that I passed on to Matt, and he, of course, investigated this thoroughly and has done the complete genealogy for the Blanton family. The history of the Blanton family is just fascinating, and we're still learning new things. Blanton's mother, Gertrude Blanton, was a pianist and a band leader. She was well known in the city of Chattanooga. Chattanooga was a progressive city by Southern standards. She led a number of bands and was known as a pianist and composer. Her brother, Dr. Walter Looney, was an MD and also a musician. He taught Jimmy Blanton and the Blanton family informal lessons. They used to drive around in the family car, and Dr. Looney would call out chords. He'd call out the first two notes of a chord, and the kids would have to name the third note of the chord. That's the kind of education he had. And I think often there's a misperception, with the history of racism in this country, that all these musicians we revere grew up from difficult childhoods, and just the opposite. He had a very warm family. They owned a house. Blanton's father was a tailor and was considered one of the finest in town. All three kids, including Carolyn, went to college. Blanton went to Tennessee State, but left early because he was offered work with the Jeter Pillars Band in St. Louis. And Carolyn Blanton told me this wonderful story of when she was young. Again, Blanton would have been about 19 at this point, so she would have been about 10, and how she would wake up in the morning and how Blanton would come home from work at a downtown hotel with sandwiches that he had gotten from the restaurant in the hotel, and just how it was quiet in the morning, and it was very warm between the two of them, and not too many words were spoken. And so let's get to it. Why don't we show, this was courtesy of Jeff Hoschmidt, this recording. This is from the Kraft Music Hall, a national radio broadcast hosted by Bing Crosby. And this is from 1941. We're going to hear Jive Rhapsody and Jumpin' Pumpkins.
that's a very interesting. Oh, that's very catchy, Duke. See, Benny, there you are. That's the blues.
I Googled it one time and I got lost. It's like talking about the recording ban. It's like writing a college term paper.
What was that about then? What did you Google, Ken?
Oh, cure for tuberculosis. I don't want to look at. Let's not talk about that.
Okay. So yes, it was just being mentioned off air that Jimmy Branton unfortunately succumbed to TB in 1942, and that it wasn't very uncommon, of course, at that time. The antibiotics that were necessary to combat TB, which is actually still even today quite a difficult disease to treat, were not available, or indeed I think probably actually even had been discovered at that point. So you really were in a bad spot with TB, and of course, you know, as with lots of other diseases and so on, you know, the quality of the air that you breathe and just how much close, just enclosed conditions and that sort of thing that you endure certainly doesn't help. But yes, there we go. Well, he died young, but he achieved so much more than almost everybody else on the planet. So there is that. So
Yeah,
that, sorry, Ken.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think that's kind of the nature of Zoom.
It is. There's a slight delay, isn't there? Slight
Yeah.
sort of lag type thing. It's not quite. I tell you what, it's lovely to meet all these people. Of course, Ken over there, right on the other side of the United States, and here we are on a little island of Britain, and it's great to be able to do that. But the technology isn't, of course, perfect, and it isn't quite like just meeting together in the same room.
No, but it's the best we can do for now. And again, my appreciations to Duke for
I love the way you say that.
putting this together.
Duke.
Is that how you pronounce it? Duke?
No, it's not how we pronounce it. That sounds almost like we're going to a market somewhere.
Well, how do you pronounce it?
I suppose we just say desert. I suppose that's
Ah,
it.
That's
But it is a made-up word, so it's not got any official pronunciation. It's just Des UK. Oh,
Some
Des UK.
say neither, some say neither.
Some people used to say Des UK, but it never really caught on.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want
well. Anyways, I appreciate what you're doing, and
Thank you so much, Ken. Again,
I just wanted to talk a little
I
more
appreciate
about
what you've done as well over all of these, many years now, decades for the movement, the study group movement and the general research. It's a great pleasure, such a pleasure to have you on the program here.
Well, there's just so much to talk about, and I really missed the chance to really meet with people, and it's fortunate a few of us had a few days to get together in DC for the conference at Georgetown, but there was that's the greatest conference that never happened. There would have been 200 to 300 people there, combination of scholars, people from the academic world, enthusiasts like myself, a lot of people from DC, you know, Dr. Salenza, Anna Harper Salenza, done a wonderful job organizing the conference, of getting grant money to put on the conference, of getting support from Georgetown to host the conference. And,
All of that, yes.
you know, that's not going to go to waste. I think we've reunited the Ellington world, and we have a lot of stuff to talk about. Like I mentioned, David Palmquist's website. Who's going to maintain that? That needs to be, I mean, he's doing that all himself, and it's a mammoth effort. And, you know, I don't know what's happened to Jeff Hosmith's collection with all his research. David's been very kind and has done a tremendous amount of work to put the Duke Ellington Music Society bulletins online on his website, which is just, you know, a 30-year compendium of Ellington research.
Are they back online then?
Well, the Duke Ellington Panorama site, which had hosted the DEMS, as I call it, bulletins, is defunct now. And so
right.
David took up the work of not just adding all those PDFs, but then also linking all that to his 75-year chronology of Ellington's history.
Yeah, so we're talking about David's web page, and it is literally one page with some additional notes and things. The Duke, Where and When. And you can find that. We'll link that. I think it probably is. I'm not sure. It might be linked from our website. But in any case, we can post a link to that somewhere. Like, for instance, hey Quentin, post that in the public channel if you've got a moment there. So look, hey Desuke, yeah. So what is Desuke doing in the future? So next week we have Michael Kilpatrick of East Anglia. He will be joining us. And
Perfect.
Very much looking forward to that. Not sure what he's going to be presenting or chatting about yet, but we'll find out. That will be great. And I should also mention, shouldn't I, Frank, that we are soliciting donations just to keep the lights on here, as it were, and just basically to support us doing this. Please do go to our website, which is dukeellington.org.uk. Can I bring that up here without taking everything else offline? Yes, I can. There we go. dukeellington.org.uk. And then if you click on Uptown Lockdown, you can then find ways to just give us a little bit of support. Thank you so much. I think we're still just on 2 people who've joined Patreon. So that's going.
Well, hello to Quentin and hello to Michael. And
let's close that down and then go back to these lovely pictures that you sent along. Right. Okay.
How about if we show those and get to the next recording?
Definitely.
What we just heard, and 41 was a very different year from 1940. The band was on the West Coast. The recording band was in effect. Strayhorn and Mercer's writing came into play. Strayhorn had a bigger influence with the band. And we're going to hear one of his best known compositions. And, you know, I have to confess that when I was last in London, I took about 100 selfies of myself at Chelsea Bridge. And, you know, I can see how that's probably not the bridge that actually inspired the tune, but the title was great. It was, you know, not the Tower Bridge or something that would have been more dramatic.
No, hang on, wasn't it or isn't it alleged to have been the Whistler painting?
The Whistler, right. And it was a painting, right. But I guess you'd call that poetic license. But, you know, who's going to argue with Billy Strayhorn?
Well, you see, there are so many people researching things that they'll definitely not argue, but just simply like to insert not even a correction really, but just a little note there, you know.
Well, let's get to Ellington did a lot of broadcasts. He spent the first 6 weeks of the year at the Casa Mañana in Los Angeles and broadcast on many occasions up and down the West Coast. And what we'll hear is what Walter Vanderbilt Vandeleur tells us is the only complete version of Chelsea Bridge, which runs 4 minutes long. There's a whole additional section which Ellington edited out for whatever reason. So you can read about it in the source, Walter Vandeleur's Something to Live For.
Right.
So
it's interesting because the two different performances from the studio recording, takes I guess you'd call them, but they have a different construction, don't they? Each one is different. Is there extra material here that isn't in either of those then?
I believe it's just a repeat of a previous verse, but in Walter's opinion, he says that by taking this verse off, it changes the whole balance of the piece and gives it a different feeling. So
well worth listening to all of these, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So shall we do that? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, let's go to it. Casa Mañana, February 20th, 1941.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is music by Duke Ellington and his orchestra via the Mutual Network. Music from the Southland's dining, dancing, and entertainment center, the Casa Mañana, located on Washington Boulevard in Culver City, near the heart of Los Angeles, California. And now, as our dancing continues, the Duke features Chelsea Bridge. Duke?
That was,
Lovely.
of course, that was Chelsea Bridge, written for the bridge called the Chelsea Bridge
Oh,
in
that's so
Boston.
Frank, that's so loud when you do that.
Okay, sorry, pals. Sorry, audiences. Promise I'll never do it again today.
Excellent.
But that was written for Chelsea Bridge in Boston. Perhaps Ken knows Boston. Do you know the Chelsea Bridge in Boston?
Well, you know, Frank, I'm just always amazed how many places in England were named after places in America.
Exactly. I can't
I
think
was
of
I was shocked to find that you have a Birmingham.
I was just amazed that there was
We do have a Birmingham, yes, that's right.
a medieval city
Named after the Alabama city.
named after New London, Connecticut. A place called London, which was named after New London, Connecticut.
New London. Well, lots of New Londons.
And you'll also be happy to know that there's a London in Ontario. Okay, there you go.
I'm
Yeah.
very happy to know that. Yes, well, I mean, the Americas, not all of the Americas, but certainly, the United States and
Well,
also Canada, Canada as I call it, are sort of outreach projects of Britain, very largely, and
yeah,
that's
that's
what-
one way of putting it. But
and obviously other people also contributed. But you have to admit that, I mean, English is the default language in those two countries, except obviously for areas of Canada which are French. Okay.
well, I appreciate that Frank is bilingual and he speaks English and American and
Absolutely.
has been able to help
It's
interpret.
very good, actually. It's very helpful. That. Thanks, Frank. Yes, definitely.
Just
But,
remember what George Bernard Shaw said: two countries divided by a common language.
Common language.
But
Well, today we're celebrating what was called Armistice Day and now known as Veterans Day, which is a day of celebration in the free world when our countries united to defeat fascism. And so, what a great day for us to get together and talk about really the best representation of U.S. culture, which
yes,
is
indeed.
Duke Ellington's music.
Yes, Duke Ellington, and as you've probably also mentioned, I mean, people like Louis Armstrong and so on, definitely. It wasn't fascism so much that was defeated on 11/11 as other stuff that was going on in Europe at the time.
Well,
Fascism had yet to really come about. I mean, I guess you could call it fascism.
Well, yeah, no, Armistice Day was later renamed Veterans Day after World War II to commemorate more than just the veterans of World War One, but the many who have sacrificed. But it sure is a nice occasion for, it's a bank holiday for me, and
Oh, that's great.
great to spend this morning or actually late evening with you or early evening with you.
I wish it was morning here, yes. No, it's great. I mean, I tell you what, definitely this jazz shed, it served its purpose during the warm weather, but I really do need to move inside. I keep mentioning that.
Speaking of holidays, Ken, in 2 weeks from today, from tomorrow, is of course probably the biggest holiday in America, Thanksgiving Day, Turkey Day. What's that going to be like this year? Any ideas? What's happening this year?
It's going to be very subdued, and unfortunately, I think it needs to be lonely for a lot of people as the pandemic is raging right now. And I know people are tired of isolating, and we all miss our family and friends. But, I think we need to maintain the lockdown myself and, just hang in there and know that we're all the same and in the same boat. And fortunately, I really appreciate you exploring. I mean, I never heard of Zoom before the pandemic. And now it's a daily part of our lives, and we get to use it to talk about our favorite thing, which is the music of Ellington. So let's get on with it. I have a couple more recordings.
I've got some newspaper clips here just to consider what I might just leave up while they're
playing. I don't need everybody to read them, but I can tell you a little bit about what we've learned. I was telling you a little bit before about Jimmy Blanton's amazing family history. And I just learned some new things through the wonder of researching newspapers online. In the Chattanooga newspapers, they had some articles about Jimmy Blanton and his family, and when he joined Duke Ellington. And one of the most fascinating elements they mentioned is that Jimmy Blanton's grandfather, who would have been his mother's father, was a free slave before the Civil War and played the bass fiddle, as they called it, in Atlanta before the Civil War. This is Jimmy Blanton's grandfather. And Jimmy Blanton's grandfather was of mixed race. His father was an English Jew. And this grandfather was Albert Lewis, who we've identified, and Carolyn talked about her grandfather at Atlanta, who lived to be over 100 years old. So he's definitely got bass playing in the family. Wow. So let's, as I mentioned in Matt's biography, he really delves into 1941, and he says kind of the common understanding of Blanton, if understanding is the right word, and maybe this isn't completely correct now, is I think our view of him is going to change as Matt's book is coming out. But it's commonly thought that Blanton's greatest work was in 1940, and that in 1941 he became sick and his skills dissipated, and his really greatest work was in 1940. And Matt has plenty of evidence to the contrary. Much of it has not been released, which is on the live recordings that we have from the Casa Mañana, which we heard, which is one of the few that's been issued. It's on a CD called the Duke Ellington Centennial Collection, not the Centennial Edition, but the Centennial Collection. This one is also on it. It's from a broadcast from the Trianon in June of 41. They're playing Sepia Panorama, which was an ASCAP tune, which had become their radio theme in September of 40, but they were still able to play it on the air in 41 because they were playing it over Mutual, which had settled with ASCAP. So we hear, as Matt would say, Jimmy Blanton exploring the outer edges of the bass. So let's take it to Sepia Panorama.
Did that finish just like that?
Yeah,
Did the acetate run out or something?
yes.
So there we go.
Yes,
Activities among sound recordists. In 1941, there, Sepia Panorama still Duke's radio theme when not on a network where that wasn't allowed.
Well, they Take the A Train had become the theme, but they were including Sepia Panorama in the
Oh, I
repertoire.
see, as a tune, right.
Yeah.
So they would still be
Take the A
perhaps...
Train was such a hit in January, and that it
Indeed.
became immediately took over
So they were
and
still...
could be played on all networks.
Well, here we go with the Zoom delay and everything. It's like, yeah. So no, the so they were actually still using Take the A Train as the theme, as it were. Then,
Right.
but
Yes.
but they were
But-
actually able to perform Sepia Panorama as there. But that recording just faded out. That wasn't just the end of a broadcast that just tailed off. Then it was just that they didn't have quite enough room at the end of the disc.
Correct. It was a home recording back by then, and you start seeing a lot more air checks. Home recordings become available by 42. RCA had a Silvertone home recorder, which you look at it, it looks like a combination radio and turntable. So you could get a disc that you could record on off the radio. So that's what that is, and it's actually pretty good. And there's some other ones, and they're in bits and pieces.
Right. Sure.
But for devotees, it's really the peak of Ellingtonia.
It's all essential stuff, and so yes, that's very interesting. It's kind of the Betamax of their day, I guess. Well, probably not quite as controversial, but still, some parallels to be drawn. And don't even mention DAT recorders. So,
Well, I wish they had something back in 1928 and 29, but that's another show.
yes.
But
well, what we need to do
wait.
is we need to invent a time machine and then take this Sony DAT machine all the way back. Got a pile of equipment just here, all the way back to 1928. On the other hand, we could just take this little SD card recorder instead. That would probably do. But anyway, righty ho.
Well,
The technologies of the technologies of the time. You know, it's amazing, isn't it? I've got open reel over there. I've got cassette. I don't have a disc cutter though, so I'm missing some things. But anyway, right.
yeah, you need a disc cutter. But before we get to the next,
I've got a disc player. That's almost as good. Okay, sorry. Yes, go on, Ken.
no, I just wanted to respond quickly to Frank's point that there was a tremendous intersection between the so-called Negro Leagues and the black jazz bands because they were traveling on the road. Bands would often show up at ball games to promote their dance. David Palmquist and I have found a number of articles where Ellington would make afternoon appearances. There's a real funny one in Oakland where they stop the game and Ellington gets out and gets on the pitcher's mound, and Snake Hips Tucker stands in the batting cage or in the batter's box with a bat. And then, of course, Snake Hips starts doing the Snake Hips dance if you understand baseball, to make for an impossible strike zone. So following the band on the road is really fascinating. And so I wanted to get to a new discovery, a photo that will show as we.
Oh, a photo. Hang on. Let's just go back to those then.
Yeah,
Which
we've got a. This was recently found at a private auction. And it was pretty easy for enthusiasts like ourselves to identify the date because we're going to see a picture of Sonny Greer blowing out the candles on a birthday cake.
Oh, right. Here we go.
So,
Yes.
so you know it's 1931, and you look at the personnel, and you know from looking at that personnel that it had to be 1941, which was really a pivotal, excuse me,
Pivotal.
spot.
That's a great word.
No, pivotal moment in the history of really the world in Ellington. Pearl Harbor had just happened, had just been attacked less than a week earlier. The U.S. had tried to avoid entry into World War II, but everybody coming. It happened. The world changed. Specifically for bands, it was going to change mightily as trains became commandeered for the war effort. The band would end up spending much of the war in New York, which was kind of, as usual for Ellington, a blessing in disguise. But really a moment of uncertainty for the band. They had been in Los Angeles most of 1940. They were heading up to Frank's part of the world. They were in Oregon. They were in Eugene, Oregon. The dance that night was canceled for Sunday night of Pearl Harbor. The band played the following week at the Mayfair Theater in Portland, where this photo is likely taken. And it's a very endearing photo for me because, again, it shows, it's a posed photo, but it shows the band at this moment of frivolity and enjoyment of each other's company and being in the moment at this difficult moment for the band. And also interesting to note that at the table, and that was a small cake. I don't think everyone in the band was going to get a piece of that cake. But if you'll know who's sitting at the table, it's the original Washingtonians who are getting the seat at the table and presumably the birthday cake. So let's hear, this was recorded right around the same time. I'm not sure if you picked the Victor or the standard broadcast. The great Billy Strayhorn tune, Rain Check. And Anthony, if you can pull up the photo at the same time, that'll be great.
Sure. So I'm pretty certain we've got the transcription version here of Rain Check. I didn't look this up. Is there a difference in the pianist between the two? Does one of them have Billy on piano and the other one have Duke? So let's have a listen to it and then we can have a chat about which one we've heard when we've done that. Hang on, here we go.
We got the new Dessau right here.
Brilliant. Okay, here we go. Let's just find this track and then we'll play it. Okay. Rain check there from December 19. Is it December? Yes, that's right, isn't it? 41, recorded in Los Angeles, and we're thinking that that's the standard transcription recording made the day after the Victor recording, and with Duke at the piano.
Hmm.
Billy was featured on the previous day's session. Not quite sure exactly what happened there, because Duke's only on one of the pieces from that session. And it's also the session at which they recorded the issued take of Chelsea Bridge. And I think, again, without checking, there's a different pianist on the two different versions of that as well. The two studio versions, that is, which were made at different sessions. So yes, when was Pearl Harbor Day then, as it were?
December 7th.
December 7th.
41.
So this was just
So that
just
was
before.
recorded a few days before, and the photograph was
Yeah.
taken a few days after.
Right, fascinating, isn't it? Oh gosh,
Well-
stirring times, although all times are, of course, in
Well-
their own way.
Well, they were uncertain times, but Ellington faced it with his characteristic optimism and energy, and kept sailing straight ahead. So that's I think the lesson to learn for our day as we celebrate Ellington. And just wanted to thank Frank and Anthony for having me on and for letting me talk about my favorite subject and coming into my home, and the chance to connect with Ellington fans around the world, and Quentin and Michael and Ian and Peter and everyone at the Duke Ellington Society of the United Kingdom, and everyone tuning in, and everyone tuning into the repeat performance. I appreciate it, and great to be among
That's right. We've got
your
to do all this again.
enthusiasts.
For the East Coast, we've got to do this all again in 3 hours, you know. Or is it the other way around? It's the other way around, isn't it? But anyway, yes. Ken, thank you so much for being here.
Great.
Yeah.
We're gonna, yeah.
In my little jazz shed here. Almost my home, not quite. And Frank up there in Liverpool with his tenor saxophone.
And
Great.
everything.
Well, we're gonna go out.
Sorry, Frank, what did you say there?
No, I just gotta,
You need to get a louder microphone. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I shall get my microphone sorted out.
So multi-instrumentalist Frank Griffith up there in Liverpool.
I just want to say that for me it's quite nice to have Ken on. We've had a number of American-based guests, including Matt Cooper, Bell Sixonis, Carl Wojtek, all of whom contributed very richly to the program. And I'm still in touch, just in regard to your point about rather elusive Duke Lim members who have created these incredible archives. I assure you, all people listening and watching now, that I have tried to make contact with many of them, and maybe they're frightened by the 8 hours early prospect. I don't know what it is, but plenty of us know about the difficulty of getting people to own computers that have that have reply buttons on them. Okay, a lot of people that have computers that have delete buttons.
Delete
but the
buttons.
ones, I understand that the ones with reply buttons are cheap. Without reply buttons, are much cheaper. So I don't blame them. But
Do we have another take of that, Frank?
I take your suggestions, Ken, wholeheartedly, and I will continue to pester, badger, and harass our illustrious North American colleagues to get up early.
It's not that early. It's
Well, it's not now, not 2 hours later. No,
Well,
no. So
it,
no.
it's early for musicians and college professors, Frank, but
Well, I know. I mean, goodness me, jazz music. Well, I think actually a lot of times the jazz sessions were actually held, well, not about early, but certainly mornings. But yes, righty ho. So, over there,
this is great. So
several time zones away from us. Ken, thank you so much for being with us.
okay, well, let's go out with St. Louis Blues, which was a way for them, the Ellington Orchestra, to end the evening, and we'll take it out with some just Jimmy Blanton, Ben Webster, great closing night solo, great playing by the section, creating the sound of a train off in the night. So have a great evening or day, everybody, and let's keep in touch, and all for the love of Duke.
Absolutely. Love you madly.
Okay, St. Louis Blues.
Thank you.